Good evening, I'm Farhana Sheikh. Here are the top stories for tonight. US and China edge towards TikTok deal, and US blocks UN call for ceasefire for the sixth time. That and more coming up on AWANI International. The United States and China are reportedly moving closer to a deal that would allow TikTok to continue operating in America, easing one of the biggest flashpoints in their trade and technology rivalry. Under the proposed framework, TikTok would remain under its Chinese parent, ByteDance, but face strict US data security requirements monitored by American regulators. US President Donald Trump has threatened to ban TikTok unless it is sold to a US buyer, citing national security risks. Beijing has pushed back, calling any forced sale unacceptable. Analysts say the talks signal both Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping want to avoid further economic escalation, even as other disputes over Taiwan, rare earths, and semiconductors remain unresolved. TikTok, with nearly 170 million users in the US, is one of the country's most popular apps. A ban or forced divestment could provoke a political backlash and escalate trade tensions. Our next top story: the United States has, for the sixth time, blocked a UN Security Council resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and the release of hostages. Against an overwhelming majority in favor, Washington says the draft didn't go far enough in condemning Hamas or recognizing Israel's right to defend itself.
All 14 other council members had backed the resolution, which described conditions in Gaza as catastrophic and urged Israel to lift aid restrictions. The veto comes as the UN warns the last lifelines for civilians are collapsing in Gaza City. Speaking before the vote, US Deputy Middle East Envoy Morgan Ortagus said the decision should come as no surprise, adding the resolution wrongly legitimized false narratives benefiting Hamas. This latest vote comes just days ahead of the UN General Assembly, where Gaza will be a major focus. Key US allies, including the United Kingdom, are expected to recognize an independent Palestinian state. Meanwhile, in Gaza, thousands continue to flee as Israeli tanks and troops press their advance on the third day of a ground offensive.
Stay tuned for more after this break. Welcome back. US President Donald Trump has suggested for the federal government to revoke broadcast licenses from television networks he claims are against him. His comments comes a day after the American broadcasting company ABC suspended Jimmy Kimmel's late night show indefinitely under pressure from the Federal Communications Commission (FCC).
The suspension followed Kimmel's remarks about the murder of conservative influencer Charlie Kirk in Utah, which prompted the FCC to threaten regulatory action. Kimmel had suggested that Kirk's shooter was a Trump supporter and accused the mega gang of exploiting the tragedy while also mocking Trump's response on the matter. FCC Chair Brendan Carr warned the suspension may not be the last, feeling concerns the Trump administration is interfering in media and curtailing free speech.
The European Union is moving to speed up its phase-out of Russian liquefied natural gas just days after US President Donald Trump urged the bloc to do more to curb Moscow's energy trade. The measure is expected to be included in a new package of sanctions targeting Moscow over its invasion of Ukraine.
The move followed a call on Tuesday between Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and Trump as Washington steps up pressure on Europe to take a stronger role in efforts to end the war. The EU is already working on proposals to phase out Russian oil and gas entirely by January 1st, 2028. Under the plan, short-term contracts will be banned starting next year. These new measures mark the EU's 19th sanctions package against Russia since the war began. The package is expected to be presented to member states on Friday. Currently, about 19% of Europe's gas still comes from Russia, primarily via the Turk Stream pipeline and LNG deliveries.
Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump says the United States will help secure peace once Russia's war in Ukraine is resolved. He admitted that ending the conflict has been more difficult than he expected, but said he still believes a resolution is inevitable.
In an interview with Fox News, Trump explained that he initially thought the Russia-Ukraine conflict would be one of the easiest to settle, given his relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
When I said help by air, I'm talking about security after the war is settled. So after the war is settled, we would help secure the peace.
Trump has repeatedly imposed deadlines for Moscow to reach a ceasefire deal or face sanctions, yet those deadlines have been ignored. He argued that Europe needs to stop buying Russian oil, saying that falling sales or lower prices would force Moscow to compromise.
French President Emmanuel Macron confirms that sanctions on Iran are likely to be reimposed by the end of the month. He says recent talks with Tehran have failed, accusing the Iranian side of not being serious during discussions.
Previously, Britain, France, and Germany, known as the E3, triggered a 30-day process in late August to restore UN sanctions. They had set conditions for September, warning Tehran to meet them in order to avoid the so-called snapback mechanism. However, Macron said those conditions had not been met and that the latest Iranian proposals showed no genuine willingness to negotiate. In response, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi insisted he had presented a reasonable and actionable plan to European and EU officials. He said the proposal was designed to prevent an unnecessary crisis and to address real concerns, though he gave no details. The UN Security Council is due to vote on Friday on a resolution that would permanently lift sanctions on Iran.
Last week, Nepal's Gen Zs took to the streets to demand an end to corruption. Within 48 hours, the government collapsed, 72 lives were lost, and former Chief Justice Sushila Karki stepped in as interim Prime Minister. Activist Tanuja Pandey, one of the movement's organizers, outlines what they expect from Karki's leadership ahead of the elections next March.
Whatever happened on September 8th, the most saddest and tragedy was that state killed 72 people, our friends. They were our friends, and it is unacceptable. So the first thing we want from this interim government is that those people who were involved in this mass murder should be brought to the criminal proceeding. They should be punished, and justice should be served, because killing people, killing young people is not acceptable, right? So our first priority is that, and second is the election. We never asked for revolution. We were only demanding the transparency and accountability to the government. So the thing that is most needed right now is protection of the democracy we have, the protection of constitution that Nepalese people struggled for 8 years, and they prepared this, right? So the major priority is the election. We want this interim government to successfully conduct the election according to the date that has been already released. For now, and then other reform will follow.
Now, with no parliament or opposition in place, Nepal's youth are stepping up. Tanuja speaks of their role of maintaining check and balance with the interim government.
Our generation has always been tagged as a lazy generation, politically unaware generations, and the Nepalese youth have proved them wrong. And this wasn't expected at all. And whatever happened on September 8th and 9th was far beyond anyone's imagination. So after seeing that, we have a full trust with our friends, and the way everyone is questioning, even this government, they were questioning whether the appointment is constitutional or not. There were a lot of debates going on in Nepal, and I believe it's a healthy discourse. And the tendency that we can see digitally right now is it shows that youth are really going to be the watchdog of this government as well.
This week on Wu Says, we looked into the third part of the mini-series on the Asian financial crisis of the late 1990s. The third episode explores the lessons learned from Indonesia. Here's a segment from the conversation with Professor Emeritus Dr. Wu Wing-tai.
So the first lesson is the right policy to do depends on the circumstances of the country.
Basically, you can't copy what your neighbors are doing, even if the problems are solved.
Yes. So what? Yeah, that is the first lesson. The second lesson to draw is that we must recognize that financial markets sometimes misbehave badly. And financial markets misbehave, the governments have to be able to step in to address it. In this case, suppose money is running out. Malaysia stopped it with capital controls. Another way to address this is that the government has enough reserves to meet the outflow, the way that Hong Kong did. So how do you have enough reserves? That's why a regional bank is exceeding a regional financial fund, like Asia Monetary Fund, would have been very important, because we can afford to pool the reserves of all the ASEAN countries together. And now the Chinese, Japanese, and Koreans have joined in. We have enough reserves to be able to defend the currencies of ASEAN. So the second important thing is it has enhanced regional cooperation in ASEAN, because we recognize that the economic disease could spread from country A to country B, which we recognize again during COVID-19.
Yeah, clearly. And that is a bit more literal, right? Literal.
Yeah, exactly. And the third thing is the political institutions really matter. If an economic crisis were to precipitate a political crisis, then the consequences of that economic crisis will be much more severe than a country that did not experience a similar political meltdown. In a previous episode, I had talked about, if you look at the profile of GDP growth rate, what happens is when the financial panic happens, output collapse. So, a sharp collapse. The moment the panic is over, there's a quick recovery. So there's a big V shape. In the case of Indonesia, it was a long, drawn-out U shape. And the U shape is not because people have to move from one industry to another, unlike structural adjustment. The U shape is because of the political fight that was happening in the country. And political instability naturally produces low economic growth.
Catch the full conversation on AWANI International and across our social media platforms.
That wraps up AWANI International for tonight. Stay with us as we track the rivalries, strategies, and power shifts shaping the new global order. For more, head to international.astroawani.com and follow us on our social media accounts. I am Farhana Sheikh. Thank you for watching and good night.